It's July 14th, 2024, and today is the day to wake up to hemp in your life. We're going to talk about industrial hemp today, folks. This is Larry Nagel, the notorious Dr. Dank, here with my producer, good friend, Chris, and we're going to cover a number of different uses for industrial hemp. Chris has numerous questions about the uses. You know, there's over 2,500 viable immediate uses for the plant. One of the ones that I hit Chris with when he first walked in this morning is the fact that as a vegetable, I mean, you can literally take, that's why in certain faiths that worship with the use of cannabis and use it as a sacrament, when you distinguish it in different categories, such as if you compare it to a vegetable or as it is, a true vegetable in itself, it's the only vegetable that has all the vitamins and nutrients of almost any other vegetable, premium antioxidant vegetable. And it's the only one that has all 21 amino acids in it, and it has more protein per pound than fish, beef, or chicken. And it can be grown right in their farmers' fields. Just so you know how valuable this plant can be in your life and how essential to the well-being and the quality of your life. Okay, it's time to talk with Chris Gaden here, my producer. Chris, I understand you have a bunch of questions for me this morning.
Yes, I do, Dr. Dank. Good morning to our listeners. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's talk about something you mentioned to me last night, actually, about the governor signed his budget bill that excludes marijuana legalization as he requested. So let's give some context. Let's talk about the bill that was supposed to pass, that people thought would pass to make cannabis legalized here in Pennsylvania. And what does it mean that he didn't sign that bill into law?
Well, I'm not real up on this. I mean, it just was in passing. I heard about it last night. So if you could give me a little better reference on it. But from what I understand, number one, it did not legalize recreational in Pennsylvania, but it did give tax breaks to the licensed producers and to increase their profit and their margin. I found that rather interesting. You have a group of people that's already making money hand over fist, okay, just tearing it from our fingers for a plant that we can grow ourselves, a plant that we can grow for pennies on the dollar, literally pennies on the dollar, compared to what they're charging us for. And as you notice, they're maintaining control. They're trying to configure, they're trying to work out the infrastructure so they can successfully have recreational without losing all control. And this is why they're trying to, or this is the reason that this bill here passed. So they have more capital to work with. Of course, when you have more money to work with, okay, the more power you have. That's common sense. And the other thing, you know, they're trying to make sure that recreational goes only through medical dispensaries. I find that almost a conflict, if not a great irony.
Well, there's a lot of frustration coming out from, again, this just happened. This is just very, very recently just happened, but there's a lot of frustration with the public because the public of Pennsylvania, they support legalization for recreational. It's not like the approval rating is so low. It's very, very high, actually. And there's a quote here from
and it's been very high for a long time.
Yes, it has been. And Britt Crampsey, the spokeswoman for the advocacy organization Responsible PA, said on Friday that Pennsylvanians are demanding action on the legalization of adult use cannabis. An adult use market can bring in more than $1 billion to the state in its first year. And every moment Pennsylvania waits to legalize, we are losing money and business to the 90% of our neighboring states who have chosen to act.
But this does not line the pockets of any particular individual in the state of Pennsylvania that's involved in the medical marijuana business currently. So, until they figure out exactly who's going to get richest the fastest, I don't want to use any curse words anymore. I'm trying to clean this up. And by the way, folks, week by week, if you notice, this podcast has got much more serious, much more to the point. You can fact check us on anything. And I think you'll find out what we're telling you is the God's honest truth about the hemp plant. And I think in a very short period, it's easy to realize how significant this plant is in our life. I mean, we're finding out that we can take in green chop high THC or cannabinoid hemp and use it and put it into smoothies. And you won't get high off of it because it's not decarboxylated, which means that the THCA is not released and psychoactive, but it will benefit your body amazingly as a tonic and food. Once again, there's more protein per pound in hemp than there is in meat, fish, or chicken. And it's the only vegetable to contain all 21 amino acids. Think about that. On top of everything it does.
It's like it's a God-given plant.
It's a God-given plant. Anyone that would ever take any stock in creation of the human race would have to be able to see the light. That's why I said it's time to wake up. How long are we going to walk around with our eyes closed, looking down at the ground? I mean, why don't we just become ostriches? Bury our heads in the sand and pretend nothing in the world significant goes on. That fossil fuel and synthetic fiber, I mean, that's the way to do it. That's the way we're going to make everybody from the Hearst through the Mellons through the DuPonts rich. What the hell?
Well, getting back to the story here. Getting back to the story here, Larry, the governor, when he signed the budget, the bill that he excluded was the marijuana legalization provision that he was behind, actually. The governor actually supports it, but right now it seems to be on hold, or it's in the limbo for right now. So the story goes on. Again, this is from...
Would you want to give us more time to plan our store
Yes.
and our genetic availability?
This is the story is from marijuanamoment.net. We're big supporters of that site. Very informative, great site. Check it out. marijuanamoment.net. It says, quote, "The governor is behind cannabis legalization. Our state needs the hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. We have robust options to vote on, including the bill that I co-authored." We're talking with Representative Kalfer. This is a quote is from Representative Emily Keekhead. So it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just there's no time on it. And also, too, what did make it into the budget for this year when the governor signed it is a section that would allow medical marijuana grower processors to take state tax deductions in an amount that is equivalent to what they would have received at the federal level were it not for the IRS 280E policy, which precludes deductions for businesses that work with Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 substances.
Right. And so their justification and the advertisement is simple that, oh, well, we're just trying to make the playing field even here, level it out for the industry. The truth of the matter is you're taking people that are already getting money, rich hand over fist. If they're not, they're just plain stupid. Ignorant on how to grow the plant, how to cultivate this plant properly. Those folks, I recommend they leave this to the farmers and take it out of the hands of the pharmacists. And we go from there. I mean, we have to make sense of this. This country's already in a chaotic state. I mean, this has been chaotic for over 100 years. And you can easily look back to the Hearst and their huge timber holdings, the Hearst family. which they use that timber to make paper, to print their news on, because they controlled the news media. Think about this, okay? You want to talk about conspiracy theory. This ain't no theory, man. This is shit that happened, okay? They literally controlled the media to such extent that any dissemination of information to the general public was filtered through them. Need I say any more? Do we have, I mean, this is like a no-brainer. I feel like grabbing a hammer and smacking myself in the head this morning and waking myself up to the nightmare that we've been living. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, is using us as feedstock for his cattle, livestock, and incredible results. The meat's more tender, it's more flavorful. Okay, everything about it, the growth rates are superior. I would go as far, and I haven't checked it specifically, but I think even the calving rates are high. This plant, okay, I don't understand how they were able to demonize anything to the point that they did this plant. I mean, like you said, some of the first podcasts, I said about my father who loved me dearly, used to tell me that he'd caught me smoking weed, he'd shoot me in the legs, because if I wanted to be a cripple, he'd make me a cripple. Okay, that man loved me. That man wouldn't do anything in the world to hurt me. So for him to be that cruel in his statements and his corrections to me as a child, he had to be thoroughly brainwashed.
There's a disconnect, and there's a stigma, and there's a connotation of just being a stoner and getting high, and that you can watch anything with Cheech and Chong, and you've got the stereotypical stoners.
Okay, well, the Cheech and Chong and all the stoner movies, I mean, that was an offshoot of what actually was created as a propaganda war against the plant. The federal government using the Mellon family, using Andrew Mellon as a Secretary of Treasury, which was good friends with Randolph Hearst and good friends with the DuPonts and heavily invested as far as his corporations. They manufactured this whole nightmare. And it was the only way they could win the war. Okay, cotton. Let's compare it to cotton. Cotton produces half the fiber and consumes twice the water as growing hemp on identical ground. Now, on top of that, the hemp is 3 times stronger and more durable. On top of that, the hemp fiber will not rot, mildew, and decay like cotton does. So why did we ever start with cotton? Guess what? It was private interest. I mean, why do you think we went for thousands of years, 10,000 plus years, and didn't need any other substance or plant to live our daily lives and to develop our civilizations? I mean, it's a no-brainer, folks. Sorry. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm not trying to be condescending. But I am being truthful.
Let's get back for a moment. You talked about this food, this plant-based food being better for you than having more. Was it more
more protein per pound than chicken, fish, or beef?
If that's going to be something
that's the reason it's such good feed for animals.
It seems like it's a market that I know it's.
You can still be vegan.
I know it's an untapped market for legal reasons, but what happens overnight if that becomes more accepted? How good could our lives be?
So much better. The production of hemp will not only keep our farms at capacity, but it will remediate and cleanse our atmosphere and the world around us. Everything right down through the soils on up. Chernobyl. They used it to decontaminate the soils for hundreds of miles from where the initial leak occurred, and was very successful. Right in the beginning, going back 3-4 years ago, um, there was a big story, maybe 5 years ago. There was a big story about a farm or a big area of farmland in Italy that was downwind from their huge industry, and that their huge industry was so contaminated or so produced so much carbon and contaminants that this would drift down to the soil and eventually deposit itself so heavily in the soils that it was not only creating a growth rate problem with the crops, but it was basically killing the livestock and showing the livestock and making the livestock poisonous from the production. Um, they halted all farming in that area. They grew industrial hemp for 3 consecutive years. Okay, 3 consecutive years, and it was able to be put back to productive production, farmland to grow feedstock for healthy animals.
I want to give some context about the bill, the budget for the state of Pennsylvania here. The consensus is that it will happen. There's no time frame on it, but the legislation will pass. And another quote, again, from the Meredith Gunter, the executive director of Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition. There's a Pennsylvania Cannabis Coalition, Larry.
Well, we got all kind of organizations. It's just productive.
Alphabet soup.
Yeah.
She says, every day that we wait to legalize adult use cannabis, tax revenue is crossing our borders and deposited into coffers of other states. Our message to policymakers is to ensure that Pennsylvania tax dollars stay in our state. The priority in September must be adult use cannabis legalization. So
right now, I feel like we're in the middle, or we're basically in the same state. Let me see if I can say this in a very direct manner to make a point. I feel like we're under somebody's thumb, that they're just smashing us to the ground and we're working for pennies in return, or at least the result that we realize is very little. So go ahead. Next subject.
Yes, Larry. You talked in previous podcasts about, you had talked about big tobacco and them entering the marijuana market.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a story again from Marijuana Moment here, published July 13th, from Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren warns of Amazon and big tobacco entering the medical marijuana market at an anti-monopoly event. So the concern is that the biggest corporations are going to step in, big tobacco, Amazon, and put such a foothold that they'll have control of everything.
They already did, Chris. Going back 4 or 5 years ago, the first year, 2019, year after the Farm Act bill was signed into law. That was the nightmare year for hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland. Everybody was convinced that if they got into the up and coming industry, the rewards would be great. And that was basically where it was predicted to happen, and what was predicted to happen by many. Some of us predicted exactly what did happen. But we were initially told that we were going to make like $200 a pound for finished pathogen-free, high-test, high cannabinoid hemp, marijuana. I use the term, to me, there is absolutely no difference. So just for the sake of identification and conversation, call it by. But Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I want to go back to
I don't want to stick on it too long.
Senator Warren was talking about. Now, we know that Amazon has lobbyists.
Oh, that's where my thought went. Goes to the nightmare. Big tobacco took hundreds of thousands of acres of tobacco land in Tennessee and Kentucky, and it grew industrial, not industrial, excuse me. And let me clarify this. If they would have grown industrial hemp, they would have probably done the most beneficial thing that could have been done to our economy, our government, and our world stature, and our farming community. But that's not what they did. They grew hundreds of thousands of acres of cannabinoid hemp because they knew if they grew enough cannabinoid hemp and put enough really poor product out on the market, they would slow the market growth down substantially. They would make a killing on what they grew, and they would crush the market price. So when you grow cannabinoid hemp, it's not like growing industrial hemp. You just don't put 1,000,000 acre seeds to the acre. I mean, right around 900 to 1,000 seeds to the acre is the way you grow it. You grow it in rows 10 feet apart, 40 to 60 inches apart in a row, each plant. The plants have, decent sized structure. I mean, for sake of conversation, if you watch any of my videos on YouTube, you'll see the kind of cannabinoid hemp we grew. Now, this is all in plastic culture with irrigation underneath. It cost roughly around $21, $22 per pound just for your basic infrastructure and your chemicals to grow it. And even if you go organically, however you want to go about it, whatever route, just organic, it's a little more expensive than if you went with some of the accepted non-invasive chemicals that can be used. So we have a plant that we're being told we're going to get $200 a pound for. So what could go wrong, man? What's the worst it could be? It drops to 160. Market gets flooded so hard, drops to $100 a pound. Still making $80 a pound, right? No, that's not what happens. The biggest tobacco companies in the country flooded the market so heavily that they crashed the price from $200 a pound promised. And that was the average. The very, very premium, the very finest cannabinoid hemp, cured and dried properly, was fetching $3.50 a pound. They crashed the price down about, I don't know, anywhere from $2 to $20 a pound. Well, this meant that the price that the farmer was getting paid for his crop at harvest was less than his inputs. And I mean, we're not talking about all the work, heartache, and hardship, and watching the rain gauges, and we're talking about just the infrastructure cost and the cost of growing the plant. Instantly, it went from everyone to wanting to talk about growing hemp to no one wanting to talk about hemp. Now, that's changing with industrial hemp. I'm working with people currently that are producing biofuels, green fuels, directly from the field to fuel. The cost of production is competitive, if not less than fossil fuels, and it's renewable, sustainable. What other term you want me to phrase it by? It's God's miracle.
The carbon footprint. Talk about that too.
The carbon footprint from the production of hemp, okay, even when you burn it as a fuel, winds up net negative. Meaning that if you take the amount of carbon dioxide that it consumes and the amount of carbon it sequesters out of the atmosphere, I mean, it's like 5 times what timber does per acre. I mean, no matter what you compare the hemp plant to, industrial or cannabinoid. I mean, like I said, even if you take cannabinoid and you compare it to, and you call it a vegetable, you turn it into a tomato plant. And right away, it goes right to the very top. Right. I mean, it's hard to believe, like I said. And I repeatedly try to make the point that it's very disheartening that it's been so easy for so few to demonize the nature of this plant. It's sacred.
Let's go back to you were you're you're coming across with some good points about the Amazon and big tobacco. So what I was beginning to say was that we all know that Amazon has lobbyists for the legalization of cannabis, but that's on the surface. On the surface, they have lobbyists trying to do the right thing.
There's other things on the surface. It's not what's happening
So
behind closed doors.
when it looks like they're trying to do the right thing, Senator Warren says that, quote, I'm deeply skeptical that the lobbying by Amazon is anything more than a self-interest move to monopolize yet another market, blocking Black and Latino entrepreneurs from breaking into the industry. Now, for someone that looks at this and says, Amazon, they have deep pockets. They could do deep pockets. Deep. Like,
yeah, like the center of the earth.
Yeah, deep pockets. So with them, they don't have.
Does this strike you with any similarity? What went on in the 1920s?
It does.
Oh my goodness, DuPont, Randolph Hearst,
history.
Mellon.
If you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, definitely.
So the point I'm trying to get.
Is that what this nightmare's about? Deja vu.
What I want you to talk about is what happens if companies like Big Tobacco and Amazon with deep pockets, what if they do control, because right now they don't control all of it, but if they were to control everything, what would that do to Black and Latino entrepreneurs or people that want to get into the business, but they can't because they can't afford to?
Well, number one, certain states, happens to be Democrat states, are making or putting wording into their licensing that you must be a minority. You must have had previous convictions. Some of them are being very specific about allowing people in the past, a certain group in the past that was never allowed to be part of this industry, to enter into it. But this is very limited, very limited. And it's usually superficial. It's usually just eye candy. So the media can play off of it. Of course, it's not like we don't know the media likes to play silly games.
Well, we talked about Big Pharma being a part of this.
Why else would you have people like you and I doing podcasts? Okay? Right now, this isn't very profitable, folks. What this is about is we're tired of the nonsense. We're tired of the lies, bullshit, and garbage that's ascended to us and been taught to us, our forefathers, and the games that have been played. The very fact that my mother and father were so brainwashed about this plant tells me just how bad the severity was and how intense the demonization was through their propaganda wars. Look at it, man. They even turned races against each other. They turned the black and the white man against each other, okay? Just for the purpose of demonizing this plant. They've done it for a lot of reasons, but this has been one of them. They actually tried to imply or humiliate the white man by this plant. Go ahead. Don't want to get too deep.
We've talked about past podcasts, we've talked about Big Pharma having a foothold, not a monopoly, but a foothold with everything for the medical marijuana side of things. So with big Pharma being out there, Big Tobacco, Amazon, these are just three of the
Okay,
bigger
right
ones.
now, one of the things that disgusted me the worst about my experiences when I been involved with the growth of cannabis in Pennsylvania is the fact that the big players are big pharma. They are big pharma. They're. I mean, I don't want to get specific. That's not my chore here. My chore is to correct the industry, not to punish individuals. I'm going to try to play nice as long as they're willing to change their ways and make progress towards truth. Sorry, it's going to cost you some money.
So my question was with, let's say, just for example, we take three: big pharma, big tobacco, Amazon. These are just three examples of big scale corporations, entities trying to get a monopoly on things. If that were to occur, would the states, let's say Pennsylvania, would Pennsylvania pass some type of law or legislation to prevent that, or is it too financial? Where those with the most toys?
Okay, monopolies, it's always sort of been a joke. If you're the one benefiting from the monopoly, then you have no motive in the world to be anti-monopoly. If you're not the one that's benefiting and you're the one that's getting a butt kicking, okay, then that's a whole different story. Okay, as anyone knows, when you have total control of the market, I mean, you're the heavy hitter. Nothing worse than chasing the hard act to follow to begin with.
So the news stories, and a lot of these come from marijuanamoment.net, but the stories
come from sources.
Marijuana sources, yes. And it's not just Pennsylvania. There's issues with the licensing all over the place. In states that have it legalized for medical use, they're facing issues with being able to have it legalized for recreational. And it seems like a no-brainer. It seems like it should be like, let's just get this passed, because financially, the money that they're not seeing yet, like for Pennsylvania, the money that they're not seeing, to be truthful, that's hurting that hurts the state.
Can you see what my shirt says? Does it say?
Math, money, marijuana.
Yes. Okay.
That's where
it's
I'm
called
going.
Logic.
That's where I'm going with this. Because the thought process is, if it's financial, why haven't they passed it already? If there's millions of dollars or $1 billion on the table, why haven't they passed it already?
Okay, here's what I've seen. People that were already financially substantial and way above the pay grade of everyone else around us. Okay, the everyday citizen, the ultra wealthy. They're the only ones that's benefited. They're the only ones that have just been able to sweep up the profits. Okay, I grew weed my whole life. I've grown this plant my whole life. I know what it takes physically. I know what it takes monetarily. I know cost per pound in all different scenarios. We're using different kinds of lighting systems, different root zone systems. I mean, that's what I teach at the Cannabis College of America, is those very items. And which, not to give an advertisement, but to advertise, we're working on getting the Buds and Brew Superstore up and running. You'll be able to buy pre-sized kits, based upon the strains and varietals that you pick to grow them and the genetics. I'll be able to tell you excuse me. I'll be able to tell you your monthly, yearly production from your investment and keep you totally free, full support of any worries, okay? Because you'll have immediate support via telephone for any problems you may have. Okay, anybody buying equipment within a 100-mile radius, we will make service calls if it's severe. And any of this is severe because any time lost or any change that stresses the cannabis plant, the female plant, is usually comes out tragic. But What I do know is, with all that being said, it can be grown extremely inexpensively and used as a medicine, a food, a building material, and fiber, the strongest of fiber. I mean, has anybody ever seen any demonstration? I mean, okay, Ford made an all hemp car. Henry Ford made it an all hemp car. And there's video going back to like the 1920s, and them taking sledgehammers, two guys, and just wailing on the trunk of this car, and the sledgehammers at times bouncing clean out of their hands off of the trunk lid. Now, that was industrial hemp. Why'd we ever go to use it still? Can we grow still in our fields? Does still create employment in the farming community? Does it utilize an efficient? Does it efficiently utilize the farmland we have available to us? The motives of few have contaminated the lives of many. Best I can put it.
That's a very good quote, Larry.
Thank you, sir.
So let's educate the viewers here. Let's talk about the uses for industrial hemp. Because I have some examples. I want you to talk about these examples. Okay. First of all, we have building material. Let's compare the industrial hemp version versus what's currently out there. What's the difference? How would it change things?
Okay. Number one, anything made from the plant, specifically in this case, the herd or the core of the plant, the wood of the plant, of the stem, the sheath, it has amazing qualities. Example, if you use hempcrete and pour the walls of the building out of hempcrete, they even have antifungal and antibacterial qualities that keep them from mildew or rotting. They breathe. So when you have a day that it's like 95 degrees out, 80% humidity, and you get this flash rain in the afternoon, God, the humidity hits like 100% for like half hour, and then it stops, sun comes back out, and you bake. Usually most buildings, I mean, they just, the paint falls off the building materials that we have traditionally used. That's how bad of a contrast happens, usually in expansion and contraction. Now, with hempcrete takes the moisture in, stores it inside of it, and waits till a drier day comes, then releases the moisture back out. Never rots or mildews. Okay? Did you check this out? I mean, we live in a world where people have buildings checked constantly for mold and mildew, and people, after living in buildings for years, all of a sudden experience health problems, and it comes from the wood molding and mildew and other deterrents that happen in a building in decay. At the same time, the building materials, hempcrete, hemp wood, can be pushed in the area. Okay, the herd is very similar to balsa wood. That would be a way to people get a good example. It's very light, but it's strong and durable.
Okay, let's talk about another product here, because the research here, it's been fascinating to me because industrial hemp plastic.
Yes, sir.
Now, this is something that surprised me, because hemp plastic immediately and significantly reduces plastic use.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hemp plastic can be biodegradable or compostable. Plastic hemp is a carbon negative renewable resource. Hemp production can be good for the planet. Really? Didn't you just say that?
Oh, yeah. I've been saying it for the last 50 years.
So hemp, talk about the uses for hemp plastic.
That's just me.
Talk about the uses of hemp plastic, Larry.
Okay. I have to throw this in there. Bill, Snappy Bill. Remember him well, right?
Yes.
His life was controlled by the shame and embarrassment of his grandfather, who was an incredible chemist and leader in the chemical industry. His grandfather was the man responsible for the discovery of styrofoam. As you know, styrofoam has been maintained since then as being one of the nightmares of our environment and probably one of the most substantial to try to compensate for. Now, Bill, God love you. You're the one actually that taught me this. This is that solution. Trouble was they'd never let you say it, publish it, talk about it. God forbid. But he did grow the best weed I've ever smoked. Hear, hear.
So we've talked about hemp for building material, hemp plastic, hemp fuel. I'll rattle off some things here, and you just jump in with your thoughts here. Okay. Hemp fuel, hemp clothing, hemp as medicine, hemp as animal.
Okay, do you realize that hemp clothing is lighter, breathes? If it's layered, it's still lighter than wool and it's warmer. All of the things you're mentioning, every last one of them, easily show to be superior when you make the product from hemp.
We have hemp as medicine, hemp used for animal.
We know it's a medicine. I mean,
yeah,
arguably a cure for cancer if we could afford to produce it and sell it, and make it available for the price it should be. Now, if you can grow your own, you can realize grams for a few dollars. Okay, grams of RSO cure cancer. Okay, if you have enough RSO that you can consume on a daily basis over a long enough period of time, it has been clinically proven to eradicate cancer cells. Let me be specific about the wording. Eradicate cancer cells. I think early in the podcast episodes, I referenced back in 1975, I was at school at the University of Pittsburgh, main campus in Oakland. My roommate was a Jewish kid. Family was very, very wealthy. They were business people in the community, owned a lot of property downtown. They traveled back and forth to Israel like we go back and forth to Jersey. And that's if you come from money. He brought an article back from Israel, 1975, man, and translated it for me. And at that time, clinical research proved that high dosages, extremely high dosage of THC eradicated cancer cells. Again, same wording, eradicated cancer cells. Now, most people don't realize that there was a prohibition in the United States of clinical research on cannabis clean right up until recently. Not only was there a prohibition on the clinical research, there was a prohibition of any dissemination of information to the general public. So this was all hushed up from Israel, and that's a podcast in itself.
So getting back to my list here, hemp as nutrition, hemp paper, hemp fiber, hemp textile, and hemp biofuel. These are like the 12 or so
I mean,
most
carpeting,
common.
car carpeting, house carpeting, any car, anything. I mean, right down to wallets, um, your underwear. It's all superior when it's made out of hemp. And it's been proven and known for the whole period of the prohibition. I mean, this isn't new knowledge. I mean, the first biohydrogen that was ever produced was produced in 1863. So, and of course, we know the quote by Henry Ford about being able to grow renewable or energy right in your farmer's fields.
I know when it's there are similarities to history because I remember when John D. Rockefeller he owned Standard Oil,
Mm-hmm.
and when electricity first came out, it slowly began to kind of go into more houses and more houses, and more people had electricity for power and for heat, and they didn't have to rely on on oil.
Right.
And so there was a lot of conflict there, and it's very similar to this because hemp being the new, not
There's
new,
people have died over these conflicts, man,
yes,
these competitions.
yeah. And then getting back to John Rockefeller, he had a monopoly of oil, and the government stepped in and said you can't have that. So they dissolved his main company into like different companies, and but he had a quarter, he had 25% stock ownership in all of them, so it didn't hurt him.
Right.
He became more financially set than he already was. That's why his great grandchildren that have great grandchildren will never be poor.
Yeah, no shit.
So, but there are examples through history of one industry not wanting to even give an inch to a competitor. Now, hemp is not a new product; it's a very well known product, but companies like for the medical use that don't want to have growers grow.
What's the internet fool that's going to fight Mike Tyson? Or at least all the hype's about. Jake
Paul.
Okay. The reason that they're so terrified of being in direct competition with him is it's like Mike Tyson fighting that fool. Okay, that's exactly what it is. All right. Imagine imagine this fool Jake Paul. Can you imagine walking into the ring with Mike Tyson? I mean, he's just going come at you, take you out, and then walk out of the ring. I mean, he isn't going to waste a whole lot of time and effort. Plus, this fool's really insulting. Now, that should be the status and the same stature, same posture of the American public about this plant. It really should be. They should realize that this plant has been the Mike Tyson, okay, without all the publicity and drama and tattoos and other foul things. But no, it has been the Mike Tyson of every scenario, every comparison that's ever been put to. Yes, sir.
There is a story here about. I want to get back a little bit to first start talking about the laws. Okay, right now there are GOP lawmakers that are pushing the Justice Department to reverse course on marijuana rescheduling. Now they're just trying to speak up and say we don't want this to be rescheduled from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 because Schedule 1 that's where it should be. It's much more. They feel it's much more of a serious drug, like just like meth, just like ecstasy, just like heroin. So still, even though still there's so much misinformation and miseducation about this.
Okay, this is where every politician, before they become a politician, should be forced to experience different drugs. It should be a prerequisite that they experience different drugs so they really know what they're talking about before they make laws concerning those drugs. For one thing, cannabis as a flower, crushed up and smoked, you can't even call it a drug. Okay, it's just smoking an herb. I mean, how simple can it be put? Now, opiates, you just don't walk up, grab a poppy, and start chewing on it. I mean, granted, if it's making milk, you'll get some effect, but that's not the way you consume opium. And any other pharmaceutical, even the most basic, take processing to manufacture them, not just growing them and drying and curing.
You said about having politicians try different drugs. I think a lot of them are on drugs right now. They just don't.
I
talk
know
about
our president is.
They just don't talk about it. But having, I don't know if it's an issue of just being an age thing where the older politicians they're so against it and the younger politicians are for it because of the age gap. It seems to be a good mixture.
It seems to be a great misunderstanding and a remnant of the propagandization and the demonization of the planet. That's what it appears to be. Now, I say there is still way too many people that are using it as a profit-driven motive for their decision making. And all you have to really do is follow the money on this, and you'll see who's telling the truth and who's telling lies. It's that simple. Like I said, today's the day. You want to wake up, America.
Nobody's accusing Dr. Dank of telling lies. Dr. Dank's been fact-checked and truthful and honest, because when we do the podcast, we don't just grab thoughts out of the air. Like, we take time, we study things, we come together, we figure things out. We want
genuine and sincere.
We want to have a good podcast, and that means being as informative as we can. It's not always easy to report and talk about stories that just stories stall. When you want things to move forward and be positive and see the outcome, the growth, not just financial, but medical.
Yes, sir.
Not for medical, but for medical marijuana, but just what marijuana can do medically on its own. And then there's such a disconnect. And that's what I see every story I read. Somewhere along the lines, there's a disconnect with one party saying yes, one party saying no, and there's not a lot of common ground for that.
And the amazing part about that, Chris, the amazing part about that is simple discussion, simple group discussion, such as the way they do legislature. You fall on the truth. I mean, you literally have to stand there and tell lies to get confused on the reality of this point.
I'm still laughing about you wanting politicians to try different drugs, because I think
they need some different drugs.
I think,
or if the drugs they're on is what they're on, I want it.
They need different drugs.
Yeah.
I think that's a ha-ha point, but it's also it's a darn serious point. If you don't know what you're voting against, if you don't know what you're against, how can you truly be against it? Not just with reading studies, but if you don't know firsthand or even secondhand, if you lack the knowledge for that, that's the disconnect between the people that want to see it become legal and politicians that go, no, we know best. We know what's best for you.
Yeah, the control freaks. Unfortunately, power is very significant in our civilization. Money. The more money, the greater your power. I hope the right money can save our economy and save this country. And I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to take a little bit of time right now and hear from our sponsors. Job lessons. Love to all. And wake up, America.
This week's episode sponsored by the Cannabis College of America. This week's episode sponsored by Buds and Brew Superstore.